Welcome back to my channel. My name is Tom and I make videos that help you awaken your soul and create your happiest life. I'm so excited to have you here with me for this video today, which is all about spiritual awakening. I want to give you a complete guide as to what exactly it means to be going through a spiritual awakening. And if you've clicked this video today, there's an absolutely high likelihood you are very much going through an awakening process. And therefore, you don't need me to remind you just how rewarding and yet challenging this process can really be. And when I was going through my own awakening a few years ago, the only thing that really saved me during those really dark and challenging times, those periods of trials and tribulations almost constantly and endlessly, it felt like. But the only thing that saved me was finding like-minded souls and people that were going through that process and that could give me high-quality information that acted as a kind of map for my entire process. And not only was this informative and helped me really understand exactly what I was going through, why I was experiencing the things I was experiencing, and that was really valuable, but also it provided me with a deep comfort and reassurance. What really helped most was knowing it was all for the highest good of my life and for all of humanity, and that everything is truly okay and everything is happening to you in your awakening process for a divine purpose that's going to unfold and lead you to a truly life-changing, amazing, mind-blowingly good destination in all ways, in your external life and in your internal life. And sometimes you just need that clarity, that map, that connection to another soul who's been there and gotten through the thick of it to remind you of that truth, which in your heart you already know is the case, no matter how dire, no matter how challenging what you're going through right now may seem. So we're going to give you that clear, simple yet powerful and profound understanding of what exactly spiritual awakening is, all the key signs that you'll be able to refer to clearly identify and recognize, yes, I'm going through an awakening, and just an overall big picture sense of why you are going through a spiritual awakening right now and how everything is truly okay and going to work out for you. So before we get in this video though, I want to offer you a free gift, which I call the Reality Shift Cheat Sheet. This is a powerful resource guide that I've designed for all lightworkers, starseeds, and awakening souls. And it really contains all these powerful secrets that I found for shifting into your desired reality using manifestation principles, using also spiritual principles too. So if you want to get that free Reality Shift Cheat Sheet, just click the link in the description below. Okay, so let's explore what spiritual awakening is. What is it? I find it valuable to look at the very term itself, spiritual awakening, to understand this. So if we look at spiritual awakening, another way of looking at that is spirit awake. Your spirit is becoming awake. You are becoming aware of the spiritual dimension within you. Now, what the heck does that mean for your spirit to become awake? Well, let's look at this simple little diagram I drew to symbolize a human being, to symbolize you or I. So when we look at this little stick figure, we see a face, the top circle, which we can say is our mind. Our mind thinks, we have thoughts, that's our mind, part of our beingness. Then we have this second circle here, that's our body, that's the physical part of us, our hands, our feet, our inner organs, this physical vessel that we live in. So we've got our mind, body. But then interestingly, we have another dimension to us called our spirit. And in the Law of One, they actually refer to human beings as mind, body, spirit complexes. So there's really three ingredients that make up our being. Now, our mind and our body are pretty obvious because we're constantly having thoughts. That's our mind, that mental part of us. And we're obviously very aware of our body. So we exist before spiritual awakening just with a mind-body identity, and functioning is just this little human bubbling around on this planet. Everything's just quite normal. I'm a mind, I'm a body. That's just the standard way we live, and most of society still live. But then there is another dimension to us known as spirit. Now, what is this? Well, it's invisible. That's the difficult thing to talk about, because it's not a physical object. It's not even a thought. It's prior to all of that. And it's symbolized right here by these orange lines. It's just a symbol of it. But really think of it like this. If you are sitting here and you can look at your body and be aware of it, and you can think thoughts and see those thoughts passing through your mind and be aware of them, then who is being aware? And that's where you start actually turning onto awareness itself. You can say, I have a mind, I have a body, but it's not me. Who am I? And you're starting to wake up to the fact that you, behind the thoughts, behind your body, are the consciousness right there, the spirit right there. Or you could also say the soul. I use soul and spirit loosely, interchangeably as terms, but we won't get into that. But really, the awareness itself, the soul consciousness itself, this pure sense of presence, of stillness, of silence. People even call it emptiness, nothingness. Or people also call it pure beingness. There's many terms to point to this dimension, but it's very subtle. But through things like meditation, various spiritual practices, many other modalities, you can actually become aware of awareness itself, or aware of presence itself, the space between thoughts, the thing that is witnessing your entire life, all of your thoughts, all of your actions, everything in existence really is being witnessed by something, and that is the spiritual dimension within you. So as you become aware that you are a spirit, and you place your awareness on spirit itself, or your soul itself, that sense of consciousness of I am itself, you awaken a new dimension within you. And that's when you start spiritually awakening. You awaken to spirit. It's difficult to talk about because, again, it's not an object, and it's not something you can conceptually understand as a thought or an idea necessarily, because those thoughts and ideas are being witnessed by the very awareness that I'm speaking of. That is the spiritual dimension within you. But what I want to say is that a spiritual awakening, and I'm going to explain this further, doesn't necessarily mean you have to be advanced in this being aware that you are spirit or any of this. There's actually so many stages of spiritual awakening prior to even having a very vivid experience of whatever this thing called spirit or soul or pure awareness is. And so I want you to be assured of that. If you're going, hang on, this is way more advanced than me, I mustn't be spiritual awakening. No. It's not like that at all. And you'll see if you just keep sticking with me. But indeed, having these experiences of this spiritual dimension, actual experiences of it, is indeed a crucial part and phase of spiritually awakening. But not the only part, as I said. But the very amazing, beautiful, profound thing is, as you let go of thoughts and you let go of identifying with your body and you just focus on the sense of presence, of that stillness, of that awareness, of that dimension of spirit or that soul consciousness that you are, what actually happens is the more you can hone in on this subtle plane of reality, the more it starts expanding. And you start and go, hang on, where are we going? It's expanding, hang on. It seems to just be expanding. Oh, and then that's when the epiphany hits. And that epiphany is that you are the soul, you are the spirit, and within that you have a mind, you have a body. You're not a mind body only, you are a spirit that has a mind and body, and this spirit or this soul is a spark of this infinite source consciousness, also known as God, or Brahman, or many, many different things across many world religions and mystical traditions. And even modern day New Age metaphysics and things like that. Call it the one infinite creator, the source consciousness. I like calling it God. And the reason I like calling it God, and I'm not a religious person at all, in fact I used to be quite a hardcore atheist. I don't know how you say, if that's really the right terminology, but I used to not even believe in anything. And I only go by experience, and I verify everything only by experience, not just belief. But what actually happens is, as you expand into this sense of your soul consciousness, of this spirit, of this pure awareness, it starts becoming infinitely connected to a greater source. And you have this sense of oneness blossom through, and you recognize that you're actually a spark of this source, and this source is infinite love. and infinite goodness and infinite beauty itself. And that washes into you. And that's when you really start tapping into more advanced states of awakening in your spiritual awakening path. Again, if you haven't experienced this yet, that doesn't mean you're not on a spiritual awakening. This is kind of the fruits or the peak experiences that can only happen a little bit at the beginning, but start to become more and more profound and strong as you keep going. But again, it's not a prerequisite to have to have experienced this to be spiritually awakening. But nonetheless, you realize you're a spark of this source, and this source is love itself. And then it's all about expanding into that, and then I guess embodying that truth within you to uplift humanity and raise the consciousness of humanity and make everyone aware that they too are a spark of this source. And that becomes, in a sense, I guess, everyone's purpose in life. The more aware we become, generally speaking, the more kind and compassionate and driven we are to be a force of love and goodness in this world, and to be of service in this world to help everyone stop suffering, stop this egoic selfishness and corruption and depraved acts we see amongst humanity, all of which are a result of the unconsciousness of this dimension within you. And so everyone's mission becomes more about supporting the community and awakening other people to this dimension within themselves. And that's kind of what we see is happening on the planet right now as more and more people start getting into spirituality. It's very amazing. Anyway, lecture aside, let's get back to it. Okay, so how does this spiritual awakening process happen? Well, firstly, when we say it kind of implies that awakening or spiritual awakening is a destination we arrive at. When it happens, when we finally awaken. And to be honest, I don't know if that's the best possible way to view it. But there really are two schools of thought, that you start spiritually awakening and you start awakening more to this dimension of spirit within, and eventually you reach some kind of end state where you become fully enlightened, fully God-realized, fully conscious, and you're just done. Your awakening journey's over. You're just awake, enlightened master, I guess. So there's an end destination. That's one view. The other is that spiritual awakening is a threshold, an opening, like a blossoming of a flower that just keeps happening and deepening and becoming more enriched and more fulfilled in its expression and experience of itself. Again, who knows if that's true? And really, what's the rush? Why are we trying to get to the end anyway? I just think that you just get to more and more satisfying states, and you get through the hardships and the challenges of the early days of going through your spiritual awakening, where you're figuring all this out, and then you start blossoming into the true potential and purpose of your awakening, which is to feel that love, that peace, that connection with all of life, that divine unity, and to be a vehicle and vessel of that. And really, we're all in this together as souls, as human beings, and so we're all supporting each other. So really, I don't think it makes much difference whether we're really trying to reach the end or not. Okay, so with that now clarified, we can keep talking about how spiritual awakening happens. And so really, there are two ways you enter into this journey of awakening: the explosive path or the gradual path. Now, an example of the explosive path would be someone like Eckhart Tolle, who wasn't very spiritual beforehand, I don't think, at least. I've read his biography, but I don't think he was. One day was just in a state of despair. He was suicidal, he was depressed, and somehow had an inner transformative experience, and overnight plunged into this spiritual awakening state and into this experience of enlightenment. Just like that, in one night he woke up, the next day he was transformed, and he's kept deepening into it ever since, 40 years later or however long later. So that would be an explosive experience that in one night or one moment catapults you far along into a higher state of consciousness, in which the spiritual dimension of you blossoms and awakens within you at a very rapid, extreme pace. This is very rare. It's so rare and unpredictable, and usually happens as a result of intense suffering, which is the result of only being focused on a mind-body identity, which is where ego arises, and it can cause a lot of suffering, and then that can just be so intense you just break into this spiritual dimension. But I don't really like the idea of having to go through intense suffering and then kind of banking on a random experience to happen. It's kind of unreliable. It's very rare to have this explosive spiritual awakening experience and journey. And so what I experienced, and what no doubt you're experiencing in your journey, is a gradual spiritual awakening process. Kind of, you take one step forward, then it's two steps back. You have an experience or insight, then you've got to go back in, and there's a backlash, and there's a calibration and integration phase, and you're learning something, and then you're falling off track, and a bit by bit you're expanding, you're having more spiritual experiences, more habits are locking in around spirituality, and you just keep expanding up and up and up and up and up. And it takes a lot of times, lots of things shift in between in this process, and it's just very gradual. And so we're really going to be focusing on that because it's the most common one, and very likely you're on that. And there are really two key parts, two key phases to this gradual spiritual awakening journey that we find ourselves on: the conceptual phase and the experiential phase. And both of these are extremely important parts of the awakening process, and they can happen concurrently, but usually in the beginning it's more of a conceptual, focus on the conceptual phase, and then usually towards the more advanced end of your spiritual journey, as you get more experience and the weeks, months and years roll on, it starts becoming more experiential. So the conceptual phase is obviously when it's more about the mental learning about it, more about mentally at a mind-based conceptual level, becoming curious, spiritually curious. And the experiential phase is obviously the actual experiences that confirm this dimension within you, this dimension of spirit. And again, they can happen both at the same time. You can be reading some amazing spiritual book, that would be conceptual. And then all of a sudden you can go into meditation and have an expansive experience of awareness. That would be experiential. But there's really two key phases, and the reason why earlier I said you don't need to have had some incredible experience of oneness or some state like that to be on a spiritual awakening path is because of the conceptual phase, which is all about learning things, and you only are learning this information if you are magnetically being pulled by a spiritual awakening journey. And so learning things, even at the level of mind, is actually a huge part of this process, and there are many other signs and symptoms in between of awakening before any kind of experience of spirit or of the soul you are, or of God, or any of this fancy stuff happens. So that's why I wanted to mention that earlier. Nonetheless, there are two key phases, and as you're in these phases, you're going to be experiencing these key spiritual awakening signs. Alright everyone, thank you for tuning into this video, part 1 of Spiritual Awakening, really setting the framework for what it is, how it happens, and some key interesting insights about spiritual awakening. Don't forget to check out part 2, which is all about the key signs that you are going through a spiritual awakening and what the purpose of this is and how you can get through this. Check out the link in the description to get that video. And overall, please like this video, please leave me a comment, I love hearing from you, subscribe to my channel. Check out the free reality shift cheat sheet if that interests you and you want to get that. And of course, my one-on-one coaching too. Stay tuned for more videos on spirituality and manifestation soon. Thank you.